Emilie is joining me today on the How I Became podcast, and I'm so excited. She is the CEO and co-founder of Turbine, a financial software for companies that manage physical inventories. Turbine is helping consumer brands with supply chain visibility, cost optimization, and expanding sales channels. Previously, she was data strategist in residence at Amplify Partners, director of data at Netlify, and held multiple roles at GitLab. She's currently living in Columbus, Georgia with hubby Casey and her sons RJ and Will and their dog Bo. I'm really excited to jump into this conversation.
Emilie, thank you so much. I'm so happy we're doing this. I thought maybe we could, start at the beginning. Your career has seemed to be with a lot of startups of varying size. But I was reading up on you and I saw that you identify as a bit more risk adverse. So I wanted to hear a bit about your background and your experience, and even with the mindset of being risk adverse, how you felt comfortable becoming a founder.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when you think of risk aversion, people don't always think of people who are really attracted to startups. But I think the thing that I care most about in my work is being able to drive an impact. And that's kind of the continuous thread across every role I've taken is, am I able to drive the sort of business impact that brings me joy? And does good for the organization, right? Like two sides of that. And so I took a post-grad fellowship after graduating from college called Venture for America. It's very similar to Teach for America, but the idea was, what if we can take top college graduates and help funnel them into non-traditional American cities? So instead of like San Francisco and New York and Boston, but what if we can put them in Cincinnati and Cleveland and Baltimore, which is where I ended up. And so the idea is you can bring really high quality talent to these cities, and some of that talent's going to stay there, some of it's not. I moved out of Baltimore after about a year, moved to North Carolina, moved to Georgia, moved in Georgia again. And so, but I do think my perspective of what it is to be impactful came from the fact that my first job was this early stage startup where I was employee number 9. And at that stage of a company, like everyone does everything. And so in the morning, I might be doing customer support. And in the afternoon, I might be picking up printer ink because we ran out. And then on my way out the door in the evening, I might be taking out the trash because it's trash day. And it's just one of those, like, you have to do whatever gets done mentality. And I think that's where, like, I care so much about like driving change and seeing the results of that change. And in a large org, that feedback loop can be 2, 3, 5 years, which is fine. I just find the instant gratification of pushing out a feature and getting feedback from a user where you had an idea over the weekend, shipped it on Thursday, and it's in people's hands and you're hearing about it on Tuesday. Like, that's incredible to me.
That really quick turnaround. And sometimes it's going to be great feedback and sometimes it means you have to tweak it. But it's such a exciting piece of being a founder or being in the startup world. So you mentioned Venture for America, but can you explain a little bit more about what that actually is and your experience?
Venture for America, the model's changed since I went through it, a decade ago, which is almost to think that I'm a decade out of college. Venture for America is a post-grad fellowship. It's so scary. This idea, so I graduated from Princeton, where like a third of the graduating class goes into investment banking consulting. And it's not that those things are bad, but like it's a funnel for talent that isn't necessarily creating the most opportunities for the most people. Like, making money for people who have money is good and important and lots of benefits to the economy, but there is something about entrepreneurship that does more for the economy, not just of a local region, but the country more broadly, and you could extrapolate even to the world. And so I found that idea of startups to be really appealing. The hard thing is, if you want to go work in an early stage startup as a fresh out of college grad, like you really don't know how to start or where to go, or it's not like you're gonna see 4-person company hiring 5th person opportunity on LinkedIn, right? Like if you're not connected to one of
Yeah,
those
that's
people,
true.
it's nearly impossible to find. And so that was a problem that Venture for America solved for me and a lot of other folks. Today, I would say VFA is a little bit more oriented to help get people to start their own companies, which is awesome. The founders, VFA fellows, have gone on to start really incredible companies. Many of them have been through YC. Banza, the chickpea pasta, is founded by a Venture for America fellow. Sticks in the women's health space. Just a
Wow.
variety of
Huge
companies.
stamp.
Chili Revival food truck, like the kinds of businesses are all over the place. And it's really incredible to see what people can do when they're given the right resources. And I talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I started this company and now we employ 5 people in the city that I wouldn't have been in if it wasn't for Venture for America in the first place. Like I think that's incredible. Personally, is the path for me that got me into startups. And it wasn't like I came into VFA saying, I want to start a company someday. In fact, if you had asked me, probably right up until I started a company, if you had asked me, do you see yourself starting something? I would have said no. You know, I'm too risk averse. I want a family, and you know, whatever the situation at home is, like I just don't see myself taking that sort of risk. And
Sort of
then,
other things are priorities in your life,
yeah,
in your
exactly,
headspace.
yeah. Whereas I think a lot of fellows, if you had talked to them from the beginning, they'd say, yeah, I want to start something, or I've already started something, and here's my side project.
So you didn't get involved at that point. Like, what drew you to it if that wasn't the end game for you?
You know, it was the opportunity to work in a startup. I mean, I see now kids are graduating. Georgia Tech has a huge entrepreneurship program. So I'm in Columbus, Georgia. Atlanta's a stone's throw away. And the things that are coming out of Georgia Tech are incredible. Like the students are graduating, or sometimes not even graduating, dropping out to work on their endeavors full time because they just have these really wonderful ideas. They are battle testing them while in school. They have mentors helping them understand what they need to be successful. Sometimes they're raising angel funds, but sometimes they're bootstrapping it, and they live like college students. So like a diet of ramen and a frozen bag of vegetables is all they need. And it's really incredible to see the things that they're doing and what's coming out of those entrepreneurial ecosystems.
And if they're dropping out, you're getting a whole other side of education from starting a business anyway. So it's not like you're not, bumming around and doing nothing. Like you're starting something and potentially having an impact on the economy or people's lives or whatever it may be. Is like also so incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think do you watch The Bachelor? I don't watch The Bachelor, but I know a lot of people do. And I've seen all the memes that are like entrepreneurship, or entrepreneur is the code for unemployed.
Right.
Have you seen those? Yeah. And so I think about that, and there's this somewhat disdain or this confusion over like what is entrepreneurship, or what does it mean, and what does it have to look like, right? Is someone who I'm working out of a co-working space today. I'm working out of Startup Columbus, which is our local incubator here. I'm thinking Lindsay from Soothe Beginnings, who has a desk over there. She started a pacifier company. And then I look 2 desks over from her. You have Michelle, who runs a company called Cirrus Gold that does photography and mental health workshops. And then I look between them, and you've got Stephen Kumpf, who's the CEO of Charity Vest. Charity Vest went through YC, raised a couple $1 million, I think $6 million. Like, the 3 of them are entrepreneurs. And is one better than the other? No, they're all just very different kinds of entrepreneurs. And so sometimes I think people get this idea that like, entrepreneurship needs to fit this very specific mold, or it needs to mean this very specific thing. And
Yeah.
if instead we just cast a wider net and said it's about creating opportunity and creating jobs, like, we can make it a lot more accessible to folks.
It's interesting that you bring this up because at the beginning when I started this podcast journey, one of the questions I asked was, what does being successful mean to you as an entrepreneur? And it was interesting to see the shift in entrepreneurs from when I first got started. It was about getting VC or hitting
Mm.
a million ARR or what. It was very these like classic big ideas versus once I actually started, I realized it was about being a really great leader or hiring the first person who I truly felt was smarter than me or whatever these things are. And it goes to your point of like, you can look at this room of people all ending up working in the same space, but having majorly different goals, objectives, metrics, stages, which is so fascinating in the entrepreneur world. But I want to go back to you for a second, if that's okay. I want to hear from Venture for America. You ended up at Smile Direct.
My first VFA job was Alaview, which was based out of Baltimore, Maryland. And then I left Alaview and I joined Smile Direct Club, which was based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I was the first fully remote hire at Smile Direct Club. Lots of reasons. That was an absolutely terrible experience. But I spent some time at SDC, and for those who are unfamiliar, Smile Direct Club is like direct to consumer Invisalign. And when they were around in 2016, they were really pioneers of the direct to consumer telehealth in this generation that was really defining direct to consumer. So if we think Harry's and Dollar Shave Club and Casper mattresses, like those sorts of companies were kind of the big ones at the time. And, you know, before Shopify was the behemoth that Shopify is today, these companies were all building their own internal tech tools and building their own websites. I was the first data engineer at Smile Direct Club. I left SDC to go work at GitLab. GitLab was my first foray into true B2B SaaS. And so much of what I learned about building a company, operating a company came from my time there. GitLab was the largest all remote company pre-pandemic. And so I learned a lot about like operational excellence in a remote first world. I left GitLab, you know, we can talk about this if you'd like, but I had a moment where I was like, oh, this company's too big for me. I can't have the impact I want anymore. And that's what prompted me to start looking at new opportunities. I left GitLab to go work at Netlify, where I was director of data. I led ML, data engineering, analytics engineering, data analytics. And so we started Turbine in 2022, raised some venture capital at the end of 22, had a couple team members come on in 2023. And then here we are in 2024. And it's just been a wild and crazy adventure.
What point in that journey, when did you start thinking about Turbine and leaving to go do something fully on your own? Because I imagine the mindset shift makes you start to think about learnings that you're going to start to pull into your own company.
Yeah, for me, those were two very separate kind of timing situations. It was that for lots of reasons, I wasn't happy at Netlify. And so I made the decision to leave separately from the like, what am I going to do next? And so I had a really wonderful opportunity to join the folks at Amplify Partners, at kind of working with their portfolio of companies. So I did that for about a year. And then I was having my second kid. And I wasn't, you know, I didn't have a full-time job. I wasn't going to have maternity leave. And so I had saved up to like comfortably cushion myself to be off work for a couple months, give myself my own version of maternity leave, and said like I had been throwing this turbine idea around. It wasn't called Turbine back then, but I'd been throwing this idea around, had done some customer discovery and validation. And I said, okay, I've got 3 months of maternity leave, strong air quotes there. Let's see if we can make it work in this 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, I either go all in on Turbine or I'll go find a job. Like, this will be my test window, right? So risk-averse personality, this is my like baby stepping my way there. So
plan A, plan B, very clear.
Yeah. And time bound, right? Like, I'm not going to sink forever into this. I'm going to go all in for 3 months and then reevaluate. We were lucky enough to have our lead investors wire us in December 2022. And so we hit the ground running. In January, we had 2 team members join us full time. And it was just a really wonderful experience.
How did you, so talking about being a mom, you have 2 little ones. I think you and your husband are both full time. How do you balance it? And I use balance hesitantly because I think there's a lot going on, and I'm sure some scary moments or funny moments of trying to balance it all, quote unquote. But how was that experience?
Yeah. So I have given up most social media, but like a lot of millennials, I have some vices that I just can't kick. And recently, Reddit has become one of mine. And I read a lot of these working mom. Oh, really? Okay. After we're done recording, I want to know what subreddits you're into, because this is like a new thing for me. I like the text-based communication. Anyway, something that keeps coming up on a lot of these working mom subreddits is like, I feel so guilty that my kids are in daycare. And I respond to all of them with the exact same comment, which is, why wouldn't you want more people to love on your kids? And, I'm not here to judge anyone's lifestyle decisions, but what has worked really well for me and my family is that I look at the daycare teachers and the babysitters we hire and our nanny and my sister and my brother-in-law and all these people who are around that are helping be a part of our village as exactly that. Like, whether it's a paid person through daycare or my sister who just can tell that maybe she should take my kid for a couple hours. Like, those are all my village. And so the way we make it work is by not trying to do it alone. And I think if there's it's so hard. Like, I recognize that it's impossibly hard. Everyone wants to put on this show of like, I can do it. I'm so tough. I'm figuring it all out by myself. And the reality is, it is nearly impossible to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I need help right now. Can you help me? But the only way I have figured out to have 2 working parents with more than full-time jobs is to have a village around you. And
I love that, because my husband and I, when we talk about having a family and what it will look like, I really struggle with the idea of, call it a nanny, or I'm like, well, I should be the person who wakes up with the kid in the morning and puts him to bed and be there for every moment. But just when you're like, why wouldn't you? It doesn't mean you love your kid less because there's other people helping. It just makes your kid feel more loved and more different personalities and more ways of encouragement. I've never heard it put that way, but it honestly, that just like really gave me a mind shift into what that could look like.
Good.
I absolutely love it. Thank you.
Good. I mean, so my oldest now is 3, almost 3.5. And when prior to having any kids, like pre-pandemic, I was one of those annoying people did CrossFit 6 days a week. Now I'm one of those annoying people who only does CrossFit 3 days a week. And
much better.
There was a long Yeah. I only talk about it half as much now. The big thing for me, after I had my, I got pregnant with my first kid, the pandemic hit, I stopped leaving the house, so I stopped doing CrossFit. And then my second life got crazy after my first kid and trying to figure out how to be a mom and work and everything. And then I had my second kid, and so I didn't go back to the gym. And then after he was born, I started getting back into like training and weightlifting. And I was struggling with like where to fit it in my schedule, right? Like, how could I possibly find 2 hours or an hour and a half? It's really 2 hours. Couple days a week to go to the gym. If you're in the gym for a 1 hour class, it takes you 20 minutes to get there. Maybe it takes you 20 minutes to shower. There you go, 2 hours. My husband's job has him out of the house early every day. My alarm goes off at 5:30 and he's already gone for the day. And so he never does the morning shift. And I was doing that 5 days a week, and I had someone say to me, like, what if you did it 2 days a week? Or what if you did it 2 days a week plus only one of the weekend days and your husband could take the other one? And that was just like such an aha moment to me that like, I don't need to be the only person who shepherds my kids to daycare. Because what does it mean to wake up my kids in the morning and get them to daycare? It's nagging them the whole time. The woman who takes my kids to school, let's call her Sally. For Sally, my toddler says all the time, Sally's my best friend. I love Sally. For Mother's Day, he wished her a happy Mother's Day because she is part of this care team that's caring for him and she loves on him. And like, I think about what it was like when I was growing up, where I had two lower middle class parents, working class parents, and a babysitter who in a home daycare situation. And I grew up with her kids. I'm the godmother to my babysitter's daughter's children. There's no reason that just because we have these care relationships doesn't mean we can't like also genuinely care for the people that are part of our lives. I'm not perfect, but I don't feel guilt when I travel for work for 3 days and get 3 beautiful nights of sleep. I definitely don't feel guilt if I have to wake up a little bit early to get some work done. Those are the things that work for me. They're the things that work for my husband. It's not for everyone, but we love our careers and our families, and I don't think we should have to choose between those.
It's so refreshing to hear, and it's true because you are so passionate about what you're building and the company and your family. Like you can have it all, you just have to make it work for you. I did want to actually touch on your family and growing up a little bit. You do come from an immigrant family. They were not entrepreneurs. So I'm curious about anything you learned from your family or your parents that impacted the way you're a founder, the way you're a leader, or how you started your business.
Yeah. I have this like super clear memory, and I don't remember any of the details around this memory. Growing up, my mom actually still works at Dunkin' Donuts. She's worked at Dunkin' Donuts since 1999, which is incredible. So my mom's working at the Dunkin' Donuts a couple blocks from my school, and I can like still see it on the inside of my head. But we're walking out of the store, and there's a straw wrapper on the ground. And as she's walking, she picks it up, she puts it in her pocket. She doesn't make a stink out of it. She doesn't put on a show. She just like picks up the straw wrapper, puts it in her pocket, and moves on. And this really stuck out to me. But like, if there was an example of like see problem, fix problem that stuck with me, that was it. Because what I saw was like, my mom saw a problem, and there are lots of ways she could have handled it, right? She could have said, hey, Johnny, can you clean the dining room? Or she could have made a big show of like, oh, I'm going to clean the straw wrapper. Nope. She just picked it up and she put it away and we moved on. And things were better than they were when she walked out of the dining room, right? And I think about that all the time, because if there's anything that I hope that someone can use to describe my own work style, it's that. Like, saw problem, fixed problem. And not because I'm doing it for pomp and circumstance or because I want all the accolades, but just this idea that like if we all just make things a little bit better every day, it will be better for everyone, a whole lot better in a month, incredibly better in a year. Like life is easier when we play like we're on the same team. And so this straw wrapper, it's such a small thing, but in the grand scheme of things, if she had walked right by it and she didn't care about it, like for her employees who would have seen her not care about it, they would have taken the impression that it's okay to not care about those things. And then when they walk by it, they would have done the same thing. So it can be this chain reaction for good or this chain reaction for indifference.
Isn't it funny how these little meaningless things, to your mom, she probably did not think twice about it, but that it has stuck with you as such a message and such a meaningful message in so many different ways all of these years later. I find it so fascinating, and to think about all these other little moments of impact as a leader growing a business when people are constantly watching you and picking up on these little things you're doing, that forms the culture or forms the way that you're building your business or raising your children. I want to dig in a bit to Turbine and the business. If my understanding is correct, you started as a solopreneur, and I'm curious if that was a decision you made, if you have since brought on a co-founder, or what that experience is, because the more that I have these conversations, the more I realize how difficult it must be as a solo founder.
I did have a co-founder who was a really wonderful human. We had never worked together prior, and I think that that is a very hard thing to learn to do on the fly.
Yeah.
In such a high stakes situation. And we just had really different work styles. We both kind of mutually looked at the situation and recognized that it was not the best fit. And there was a very amicable a separation there. And I think it was best for all parties involved. Yeah.
How did because you raised also quite early in the business. So how did you balance raising? Isn't like you whip together a deck in an evening and that's it. It's almost a full-time job. So I'm curious how you balanced the decision to raise and all the pieces that come with that, and starting the business at the same time and being a full-time founder, because those are two very, very full-time jobs.
I did a lot of customer discovery before we decided to raise, and before I did that all in, quit my job to work on Turbine. And so I was having serious conversations with potential design partners 6 months before I ended up working on Turbine full time. I remember wanting to talk to a very specific persona. A couple of my friends, I would go through their LinkedIn connections and say, hey, can you introduce me to this person? And after doing that a lot, I started seeing a pattern in the problems that I was talking to people about. And then the other thing is, people have other people who do their job in their network, right? Whether it's people they work with or people they worked with in a previous role. And so I would talk to someone at this company and say, do you know anyone who's dealing with this at a company similar to yours? And they would say, yes, you should talk to my friend ABC. And then it was almost like I could find that target persona and hear the problems that they were all having. And that allowed me to do a lot of validation and de-risking before I was at the point where I was like, okay, we're going to do this as a business. So, I must have had close to 100 discovery conversations between March and September while, working full time. So it was like a side project, for lack of a better term. And then, so when September rolled around and I said, I'm going to go all in on this, I had already kind of found some of the contours and the shape of what we were doing. We weren't figuring it out.
I find when working, because I do some growth advising or brand advising for startups, that if it's really early stage, sometimes that piece is missing. It's like they have a great idea, but finding that product market fit or really doing that discovery early on is not thoroughly done because they're just so passionate about the idea. And it ends up meaning that you have to pivot a lot more down the line. So
Mhm.
I mean, I definitely feel this de-risk theme coming through your story, but what a way to save you so many headaches down the line. But I guess my question from that naturally is like, were there still mistakes or pivots that you had to
Oh,
make
yeah.
even with that? And
Yeah. So I'll highlight one that probably the biggest pain point, and ended up posing the like largest hurdle for us down the road, is that like the timing. We were selling to multi-channel, omni-channel consumer brands, right? And the
yeah,
worst time of year to sell into those brands, October, November, December. Like, it's not uncommon for a brand that does most of their sales around Christmas to do like 50% of their revenue in the last quarter of the year between Black Friday and the holiday season. And so, like, we got all this great validation. We got all this feedback. I'm like, great, I'm going to quit my job to work on this full time. And everyone goes, radio silence.
yeah. BFCM, that's the only thing they're focused on.
I know.
Nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was looking at it from what's the best timing for me. And that was the right timing for me. But what that meant was we had like all these traction conversations that just froze. And so I don't know what I would do differently, but I will say that was one lesson that if I could only go back in time and tell myself one thing, it would be that.
It's hard when you don't have like, I would have done, you're not saying, oh, but I would have done it XYZ, that there's not a clear alternative. It was just the timing sucked. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's tough.
Yeah. I don't know what the alternative would have been. Actually, I was just listening to a podcast this morning from the founder of Shipt, SHIPT.
Okay.
And he actually stopped going to school, and then school called his parents. And then after a lot of conversations and sounds like potential disagreement with his parents eventually let him drop out to start this venture full time. If you shifted the timeline even by 2 years so that I actually finished high school before starting that first company and pushed the Shipt timeline out 2 years, it wouldn't have worked. And I think about that a lot because it's like, if we had started Turbine 3 months later, would we have found what would have been different? Like, I don't know.
Totally. Even maybe the VCs wouldn't have been ready anymore, or your first amazing hire would have gotten a different, or whatever it may be. But it's true. Everything sort of happens, the way it's supposed to.
Maybe
Which brings
our name would be Turbine Chat GPT or something.
Yeah, exactly. It could have been so different. So you're 2 years into it, you're going strong. What is it that continues to wow you, or things that just have stood out to you as you are bringing on new customers?
I regularly am just so impressed by the sheer willpower of our customers to solve some of their problems. I have this recurring task every Friday that says hit email inbox 0, and I don't think I've hit it in like 6 weeks. It just keeps rolling over and yelling at me. But it's just absolutely incredible, the dedication and the diligence and that discipline. And so when I talk to them about Turbine and I get to see their faces light up and they're like, oh my God, I can see how this is going to save me time and energy. Like, I get excited by that. It's a team effort because so much of what we've built, so much of what we've done is in direct response to the feedback we're getting from our customers. Our customers, our design partners, our early users, the people who are willing to hop on a call and listen to us talk through these things. Like, those are every step along the way.
Yeah. And it's such a great way to build. Like then you know that you're truly building
Yep.
the right features, the right product. Um, so I have my last two questions for you. So the second last one, as founders, you're told a million one pieces of advice. And I'm curious if there's a myth or something you were told that for future founders you would want to dispel.
I think there is this stereotype of like the young 19-year-old founder who lives in a hacker house with no obligations. And I think part of the reason people are like, ugh, tech founder or like tech bro is that that's what they think of. You know, it's
Mhm.
Mark Zuckerberg as the jerk in the Social Network movie
Right.
or something to that effect. And I want to challenge the idea of what we think of as founders. I think that's one of the reasons I loved your podcast, Kelly, is that it's not that. Like that isn't what every entrepreneur or every tech entrepreneur looks like. And
Right.
I do think it's hard for people to imagine themselves in a position if they don't see someone who looks or sounds or has life experiences like them. So, yeah, I think I'd want to dispel the idea that like the only successful founder is like young something 20 something tech bro who stays up till 2 a.m. on like ketamine and Red Bull or something.
It's very true. And that's part of why I love these conversations because it goes to show what an array of people can start really incredible businesses. It was part of what I loved working at Shopify was that it was empowering anyone to be an entrepreneur and any type
Mm-hmm.
of entrepreneur. So I think I like that myth. I think that's a really great one. My last question for you, as you know, the podcast is called How I Became. So I leave it to you to name your episode. So when we talk about Emilie and how you became,
I think it really comes down to how I became the Turbine founder. And part of it is because I'm only 10 years into my career. Like,
mhm,
Turbine is what I'm doing now. It takes up my brain space. It's what I hope to be doing for the next 5, 10 years. But it's not what I'm going to be doing forever. And I think all those things that we talked about, from being in college to being in Venture for America to all these crazy startup experiences to starting a family, like those all shape how I approach my role at Turbine. But that's only a small piece of the grander Emilie puzzle.
fabulous. Thank you so much, Emilie, for joining me today. I really enjoyed this podcast, and I know our listeners are going to love it too.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it.